Good afternoon. My name is Sammy Desai, and I'm the director of the Manufacturing Policy Initiative, which is a policy-focused effort at Indiana University. It is a pleasure to host our first forum in manufacturing policy, which is jointly organized with the Women in Manufacturing Association. And our focus for today is on the opportunities and challenges for women in manufacturing. It's a real pleasure to be able to have three wonderful speakers on board with us today. And the format is going to be something like this. We're going to have each speaker talk for about 5 minutes with prepared remarks and their thoughts on the manufacturing industry and on what the future looks like for women. And then we're going to have some open conversation where we'll be taking audience questions and talking about specific opportunities for the future of women in the industry. So I'm going to tell you who we have here today. We have Allison Graylis, who is the president of Women in Manufacturing. Allison is the founder and president of the trade association, Women in Manufacturing, that supports, promotes, and inspires women in the sector. She's also the president of the educational arm of the association, which provides effective and affordable educational opportunities. Graylis also hosts Hear Her Story, which is a monthly podcast that celebrates the stories of women in manufacturing careers. And she is a past vice president of association services for the Precision Metal Forming Association. We also have our second speaker is Consuelo Poland Lockhart. She is the executive director and founder of the Latinas Welding Guild, which is based in Indiana. She has trained in welding and fabricating, and she's worked a number of jobs related to welding. She has also led Ruckus Makerspace for 3.5 years. And in October 2017, she launched the Latinas Welding Guild. The Guild is a need-based program that focuses on creating barrier-less education and on the advancement of women in welding. And she and the organization advocate for more opportunities for the Latino community as well as families within the education system. And our final speaker for today is Sue Smith, who is a vice president at the award-winning School of Advanced Manufacturing, Engineering, and Applied Science at Ivy Tech Community College. She has played various roles, including in the corporate college and workforce development at the campus and state level. And she works routinely with employers to ensure that programs match industry needs. She has represented Ivy Tech at the state, national, and international level, and she is a past president of the American Technical Education Association. So with this fantastic group, I'd like to turn the floor over to Allison Graylis.
Well, thanks for having me on today's webinar and discussion, and thrilled to be a part of this discussion, especially as we celebrate Manufacturing Today. Manufacturing Day has been something that in recent years is celebrated the first Friday of each October, and our organization is excited to ourselves discuss the important topic of women in industry today, as well as to support career awareness year-round as an organization focused on women in industry. So a little bit about our organization, as was mentioned, I am the founder and president of the Women in Manufacturing Association and Education Foundation. We began our work more than a decade ago, specifically with a mission to support, promote, and inspire women in manufacturing careers, as well as the companies that these women are connected to. Present day, our organization has grown to serve now more than 8,700 unique members in 48 states and 35 countries. We also are blessed to have 30 locally led chapters, which provide local access to training and education and networking. And all of those local chapters are powered by women in industry who are committed to helping expose individuals to manufacturing careers, as well as to connect those currently in careers. We have a strong foothold of companies that we work with. We present day have more than 1,500 unique companies that we ally with and partner with to further our efforts to recruit and retain and advance women in industry. We specifically have 196 corporate members, and we deliver to those companies access to training and educational resources, recruitment resources, which companies have been challenged with this year as they look to recruit talent and fill the nearly 900,000 open manufacturing positions. So we power career fairs, we have a job board, as well as we do corporate benchmarking. And marketing, which I'm sure we're going to talk about a little bit today around how to attract a new generation of talent into manufacturing. Marketing has always been a focus of ours and a key priority. And as was cited, we did launch a podcast this April to which I host called Hear Her Story. And that's an extension of a blog series we've been doing for now more than 8 years, where we feature the stories of women in industry. Our organization is also very active in producing conferences and events. And our largest conference goes live next Monday. It's our annual summit. It's our 11th annual industry conference for women in manufacturing. And we're really excited to host nearly 800 guests from all over the country and globe, both here in Cleveland, Ohio, where we're headquartered, as well as virtually. So again, thanks for having us as a part of today's discussion. We're happy to support this dialogue and excited to kind of hear from all of you, your questions and insights.
Thank you, Allison. Consuelo?
So my name is Consuelo Lockhart. I was born in Guatemala, and when I was 3 years old, I was adopted by American parents and was raised up in northern Michigan. And so I've always been an artist, and I've always used art as a means to communicate my feelings, thoughts, and just even connect with my heritage. So a lot of the artwork that I've done has always been inspired by textiles and other just other things that the country has. And so I've always wanted this to be able to connect with other Latinas and other Latinos. And so I graduated from Kendall College of Art and Design with a BFA in functional art. And after I was done with Kendall, I ended up applying for a grant and was able to go back to school and decided to, try out welding and fabricating. So I did an 18-week job training program. I completed it early since it was self-paced, and was offered the opportunity to be a sponsored artist in an upcoming art competition by the community college I was going to. And then also had other employers and companies also offered to sponsor me. I ended up getting hired on at a small manufacturing company as a production welder. So just based on personal experience from being the only woman in my class, the only woman on the welding team, Latina at that, I had a lot of different types of experiences, and that really helped motivate the launch of the Latinas Welding Guild. I had an idea of how I wanted to start an all-women's welding school in Guatemala, but obviously needing to pilot it here in the States. So I understood what all it took. And in 2017, I launched the Latinas Welding Guild, and I have been busy ever since. But for the most part, the need to start it was to really kind of create this safe learning environment for not just Latinas, minority women, and just all women in general, so they could feel safe asking questions, learning, just because I know from my experience that was not necessarily the case. And then we help them case by case, depending on their financial means. We'll adjust their class fees, provide other types of scholarships. So if that's transportation or childcare, we'll work with them as well. For those who want to get placed into the workforce, we'll work with them on placement. For those who are aspiring entrepreneurs, we'll help incubate them until they're ready to leave the organization and have their own business. Our long-term goal is to help keep women in the welding industry. From our experience, it's not necessarily difficult to get women excited and interested in learning how to weld, but the challenges are, how do they stay in those jobs when there's already a pre-established culture in welding shops, and just even within the welding industry with certain groups. So our hope is to really help support them long-term, but also work with employers so we can have a nice, healthy pipeline for potential employers to, have a really good employee. So.
Thank you, Consuelo. Sue?
Oh, thank you. And those are certainly great, great organizations to really, for women, to support women. I have been in manufacturing for many, many years now. I first worked in manufacturing, and now I am the vice president for the School of Advanced Manufacturing, Engineering, and Applied Science at the nation's largest singly accredited community college. So that's in Indiana as well. And when I started my career in manufacturing, I wish these organizations were around, because I started right out of college working with and sort of directing and supervising men that were the same age as my dad. So it was quite an experience, and one that would have been very helpful to have these organizations. But you know, manufacturing, it's a great career for women, and I have enjoyed it. I've enjoyed working now with manufacturing companies and helping them understand, you know, how to work with their employees, and how to work with the colleges to get the talent that they need. But you know, it's really unfortunate, because some data shows that over half and even 3/4 of women in the US don't recognize manufacturing as a viable career. And I'm glad that the folks on this panel do. You know, manufacturing companies really, I think, understand. It's very encouraging to hear that they are understanding more and more that they need to change their culture in order to attract and retain women. So I think that's really going a long way, because we've all experienced firsthand the issues with supply chain that occur when companies have offshored. But now that companies are moving back, the workforce deficits for manufacturers is going to be further exacerbated. So we will need more people in manufacturing and at higher skill levels. So, you know, if we have 2 million jobs opening in the next 10 years or 4 million, I mean, the number is so daunting, and we really don't have the folks in the pipeline to fill those jobs. So what we need really is a national campaign, I think, to really recruit these diverse populations, including women, into these great manufacturing jobs. We're seeing the wages trend up, particularly in Indiana in manufacturing, but we're not seeing the enrollment rise at the same level, or really very much at all. So community colleges across the country, we all are poised to develop the manufacturing workforce. And we need students from all populations to really do that. And so the high wage and high tech careers in manufacturing community colleges have developed those long and short-term training solutions. And so we have those in place, and we're ready to use those. I think they are flexible. I think they are, you know, like I said, short term. They do a lot of competency-based kinds of training, as was mentioned, and some of them are self-paced. So I think that training exists and would appeal to women. But much of our student population currently in the manufacturing programs is already working. And so we have, you know, we have them come to us for some upskilling, but most of them are already working, and a lot of them are in apprenticeship programs that really develop them to an expert or mastery level. And I think that's something that really could appeal to women as well, are those apprenticeship or structured type programs that could, you know, be chunked up into certifications, taken as competencies, and really flexible, because I think that's really what women in manufacturing need, is that flexibility. So the positive experiences in education are just as critical as those in manufacturing. And really, women need to see other women as successful in manufacturing. And so I think, you know, at Ivy Tech, we have made an all-out effort to recruit full and part-time faculty in manufacturing to serve as teachers and mentors, and really to support women in their manufacturing programs, and to change that perception about manufacturing for women. So we have had some success, and our female population, our manufacturing programs has grown, but really it's not enough to meet the demands in our state. So we're really trying to develop and have developed these clear structured pathways like apprenticeship so that we can recruit and retain talent. And it appeals particularly to women in diverse populations, because knowing the expectations for their job in each semester and how they move up in a manufacturing organization is critical and to attracting and retaining them. And I think that, I think the employers would go a long way in trying to work with their colleges to develop those. So as colleges and manufacturing companies, we can work closely together, but we really can't do it alone. So a national campaign, I think, is essential to changing the perception of manufacturing, particularly for women in diverse populations. And I think we need to incentivize the structured pathways so that we really have those laid out clearly, those amazing opportunities for women in manufacturing. These are rewarding careers, and raising the awareness of these high-tech, high-wage careers in manufacturing, structured pathways. That's the way we can retain talent and really secure our manufacturing base in the United States. And that sustains our country's innovation and continued prosperity.
Thank you. Thank you, all of you, for your comments. For participants, please do enter your questions into the Q&A box. You should find that down in the menu bar for your screen, and we'll take a look at those questions as they come in. You can also message those questions in. So one thing I wanted to pick up on that Consuelo, you mentioned, and Sue, you talked about as well, is you talked about a culture in manufacturing where women might come in, but they might not stay in. And so could you talk a little bit more about what you've seen and what you've learned about that experience of an established culture and what that looks like?
Yeah, so personally, when I got into welding and fabricating, my experience was a little uncomfortable at times, just because I was the only woman. And I've kind of felt like, because you typically see men as welders, I was intimidated with like, well, can I possibly learn all of the complicated, technical terms or processes of welding just like the other guys? And so it's like having that self-confidence is really, I think, what a lot of women struggle with. You have imposter syndrome, like even if you do get a welding job, do you actually feel like you're competent and good enough? But then also, if you're going into like a manufacturing company as a welder, at least for me, a lot of guys didn't even know how to interact with me. I don't know, like if it was because I am a minority woman, so they don't know how to relate to me in any way, because a lot of the men that I've been around in the welding industry have been, typically white male. And so there's that cultural difference. There's possibly an age difference. So they might have thought I was really young, so I might not know a lot. And I did have some weird interactions with some folks, but I also did have some guys who like stepped up to the plate and tried to take me under the wing and also help me. Even when I was frustrated, because I felt like at one point I was being set up for failure at the company I started off with. Here I am trying to weld up so many parts a day, and the pieces that they keep giving me weigh about 2 times the size of like my weight. So how am I supposed to, be successful in my job if I can't even lift or move the pieces that I'm supposed to be getting out the door? So, and that was even an example of like, so other women, if you're in this role, how do you advocate for yourself? How do you talk about maybe some of the issues that you're having? The easy way would to be just quit and not go back to work and not have to deal with it. And so, I mean, I contemplated that, like, do I just quit and not have to deal with it? Or do I potentially say something? Will I get in trouble if I say anything? Will I be treated differently? I don't know what the repercussions would be if I actually say anything. And you know what? I said, well, if I really want to make this a career for myself, then I need to say something. I'm not going to let somebody potentially run me off because, I'm an easy target for whatever reason. So I ended up saying something to the supervisor, explaining, and then I was a little bit nervous, but I had my whole spiel. I had my reasons of why, I felt like I should be moved to a different department. And in the end, you know, I was able to move to a different department where I could actually physically and more confidently feel like I could complete projects. Um, and so just even like simple things like that. When I first started off, I didn't know any other women in the industry. I didn't have a mentor or a friend I could be like, hey, so how would you deal with this situation at work? Or, hey, you know, I'm really thinking like I want to make welding maybe more of a business for myself. Who do I go talk to about steel, or who do I talk to about getting equipment, or what's like a really good resource for me to just have as I'm starting off. And, you know, I would go to a couple different businesses like a powder coater or steel shop. And at the time I was doing some woodworking, and every interaction I had with some of those folks running those businesses wasn't always nice. So, you know, the fact that I was asking questions was kind of annoying to some of them. And I'm like, you know, it's not going to prevent me from continuing on, because I'm trying to learn. And if they want to get mad at me for asking questions, then that's their problem, not really mine. And so just kind of taking experiences like that helped me mold what I wanted the Latinas Welding Guild to do. Because, you know, when I was done with school, I wasn't necessarily confident in maintaining my own machine, knowing how to turn it on, dealing with gas tanks, because it was a community college, like it was already on its own system. So there were a lot of things that I wanted to actually break down even more. And before COVID hit, we were taking field trips and having women go to a metal shop and actually look at what steel looks like, learning how to order it, different types. And just even connect them with somebody else in the industry, so they now have a friendly face or an ally that they can go to and be like, hey, I have a project. I don't know what I need. So just little things like that. And then, you know, for the women who do want to go on the workforce, you know, we try to prepare them, because a lot of the women that we work with are low to moderate income and are facing different barriers like social, economic, cultural, education, potentially language. And so how do we prepare them for a potentially toxic environment? And so some of the women who've gotten placed have unfortunately faced different layers of harassment. There's been a lot of racism, and, you know, the longer that we've been in the industry, the more stories we hear from other women. And I wish I could say it surprises me, but it doesn't. And so we're trying to figure out what are the best ways to help prepare them, so then they don't try to take the easy way out and just quit. So how do they self-advocate for themselves? And, you know, how do they potentially pave the way for other women from our organization and just from wherever want to get placed into those environments? So I don't know if I answered your question or not, but
I think it's
Yeah, and
interesting, Consuela, that you have the same experience as I had many, many years ago when I started in manufacturing. So I think that's an interesting for me to hear that it's very similar to what it was then. I think that what Consuela said about having a mentor or having someone that they can go to that even knows what they're experiencing is critical. I think having faculty and adjunct faculty, again, that are female, that have that manufacturing experience, that have worked in manufacturing are really, really important. And I think it's important for manufacturing companies to hear what Consuela has to say, that, you know, things are the same. And so that more effort needs to be made to create that culture that's flexible and supportive of women. I also think that competency-based education could be the great equalizer. I mean, if everybody has the same competencies and can do the same roles, you know, like if everyone's a good welder that works with Consuela, then that makes it more equal than if, you know, if one is better than the other, or a female is better than a male, for example.
And I was just going to share. Oh yeah, so I was just going to weigh in, Sammy. So, you know, our organization started more than a decade ago, specifically with an interest and mission to support women in industry. So we saw and heard kind of similar anecdotes and stories about people feeling isolated and alone, and as though they did not have a place to go to for advice or resources or best practices. And so, you know, our community is meant to hopefully be a safe space where people can go to find information, advice, support, guidance. You know, we help facilitate mentorship and sponsorship. And, you know, we're working with companies specifically to address some of the issues brought up today. So, you know, we've been working now for almost 10 and a half years. And I do think that things have improved. There's lots of progress still to be made. But as we work with companies and about, as I think I mentioned earlier, about 1,500 unique types of companies, we see more and more companies taking it very seriously that they need to change cultures, especially given the activities and events of last summer. Companies, I think more so than not, are committed to diversity, equity, and inclusion. And how can we make our places of work safe places where people from all different backgrounds, genders, identities can feel as though they're appreciated and supported and included. And so as we look at companies, you know, when we started our work, there were about 27% of the manufacturing workforce was female. Present day, it's about 29%, about 1.5 million women in manufacturing. And we hope fewer and fewer women are experiencing some of the things mentioned by Consuela. Again, there's lots of companies that have to change and reevaluate how they do business, and then also look at their procedures and policies. When we surveyed women in industry last fall in 2020, we asked what are the key kind of challenges for you in industry, as well as what are the key things that are most important to you as would influence you staying in manufacturing. And two of the biggest things cited were the areas of childcare and flexibility. So when we look at kind of what helps people stay in industry, those things are hugely being addressed by companies present day. You know, looking at alternative or unique scheduling, looking at, as well as to how do you support and make childcare affordable, and look at the living wage that you're paying individuals, especially those in production. So I think there's there's change underway. I think there's improvement that's happening. There's still, again, lots of progress that can be made so that we eliminate some of those negative things around our industry. But I think lots of improvement. And I did notice in the chat, there were some questions about recruitment. So, you know, how do we attract women into industry? You know, I think one of the biggest pieces is really around that area of marketing. So how do we talk about what modern manufacturing looks like? How do we share the stories of women leaders in manufacturing and share the opportunity to have access to potential sponsors and mentors and people that can kind of help you along your career? And I think, you know, we've always said that you can't be what you can't see. So our organization has been very active in sharing stories of women in industry so that women can see women like them and as well feel like there's a community that they can turn to.
Yeah, that's really helpful. And so Leslie Wells had a question, which, you know, I think we answered around what has changed in manufacturing culture over the past few decades. One thing I wanted to ask you related to this is employers are often concerned with finding that employee or filling that need. And what you're really talking about is a pipeline and a broader industry problem. You're also talking about an economy problem. So caregiving and flexibility are not issues that affect women or potential women in manufacturing only. They affect women across all industries. And so to what extent can manufacturing employers mitigate these broader conditions? And, you know, could you share maybe some examples of things that you know that have worked, whether it is something that an employer did or a public policy example or something that a workforce development agency might have done?
Childcare and flexibility have been issues prior to the pandemic. This has just been illuminated during the pandemic, and we've seen the huge impact. I mean, 2.3 million women have left the workforce because of a variety of different reasons, but one of the most significant is that the lack of access to reliable and affordable childcare. So that is a policy issue, Sammy, and I think that's something that, you know, employers and educators and institutions have to talk to policymakers about. I mean, that the prime audience that we're often looking to fill positions for is in production. Those women in production need to be able to afford and have access to childcare. They can't show up to work if they don't have someone to safely and securely watch their children. And so it is a big issue. Companies are, as you asked, some companies are getting creative. You know, sadly, it's companies that have larger resources that have been able to establish on-site childcare facilities. Other companies who maybe don't have the financial wherewithal to establish on-site childcare are looking at flexible shifts and shifts that allow a woman to, for example, especially parents, and this doesn't just apply to women, it applies to, I think, parents in general or people who might even have elder care responsibilities. But for parents, that's a prime audience of people that could be filling these open positions. And so some companies have gotten creative to create schedules that allows a parent to drop off a child or get them on a bus for daytime schooling, and as well provides them the ability to exit a shift or leave work in time to get kids off of buses and or pick them up. So companies are trying to get creative. They're as well looking at, sharing jobs and, shared positions where, different people can share shifts so that, multiple people can still have access to capital and to money and opportunities to support their families, but at the same time have the flexibility where they can still support families and other obligations. Also, returnship programs have been huge. So, part of our benefit as an organization is companies share best practices. So we've had companies talk about returnship programs where they're kind of helping quickly skill people back who've been out of the workforce. As well, a lot of companies have gotten creative with partnerships with, for example, veteran organizations, people coming back from service, partnerships that have been very successful with community colleges, like SUE's, I'm sure, where employees are tapping into those that are already in training to get them kind of co-oping and having apprenticeship opportunities at their facilities. And apprenticeships is a huge area of focus for us. There's too few women in apprenticeships. And, we're trying to share the stories of women in apprenticeship programs and how these are great pathways to profitability and job security and training. So that is a whole other area as well.
And Consuelo, you talk about wraparound services to some extent that you're providing through Latinas Welding Guild. Could you talk a little bit about what you're seeing works to keep women in, to get them in, but also to keep them in these jobs?
So, we're looking at the barriers that some of the women are facing that come in. So we do have an application process. So then it helps us kind of screen and see maybe what needs they have. And then we actually have an interview process. So once they fill out our initial form, then we'll, kind of ask a little bit more in-depth questions. What, like, why do they want to do welding? Is there like a goal they had in mind? Have they ever known anyone who's been a welder? And I think probably about 95% of the women that have, entered into our program or even applied have all had fathers, uncles, brothers who have gone into welding and have worked in welding forever. But when they showed interest in, welding, then they were basically told no, that they wouldn't be allowed to do it, or if they did it, they'd fail. And so a lot of these women are, trying to prove a lot of people wrong. And so, we try to work with those who are who really want to make this a life-changing career. And so, and also become financially independent. So even if they have a partner or a spouse, they may be financially, the one that is responsible for their kids or bills and stuff like that. So we try to take all of that in consideration along with their income. So for the women who are unemployed and really want to make this a career goal for themselves, then, we do take that as a high priority. If they're single mothers, then that's another priority. So for those who are unemployed or are below the poverty level, then we do work with them on their class fees. And so we'll provide us income-based scholarship. So that kind of eliminates that barrier of financially being able to, enter into the program. For those who might have transportation issues, we might give them like a bus card. I know that I've Ubered a couple students to and from class over the 10-week course. And so just working with that, we have done, we did pilot a on-child care kind of project during one of our semesters. And it was a little tricky because the kids knew that their moms were right in the next room right there. So they were more accessible than maybe if they had a babysitter or whatever. But and so then for the women who have gotten placed, we're still working through that part of what are the types of resources that we want to be able to provide them in job preparation. So we're actually looking at launching a new initiative next year. We're calling it the Equitable Employment Advisory Coalition. So for that advisory group, that's where we're trying to work with other groups that, like a staffing agency, We're working with the Indiana Commission on Latino and Hispanic Affairs, just because, you know, women are facing certain barriers, but also the Latino community is also facing their own set of barriers. So how do we try to kind of get ahead of some of that? So whether it's status, you know, how do we work through that? And we don't have any prerequisites. So for those who don't have a GED or high school diploma, is that going to be an issue in employment? So, I mean, there's different layers, immigration issues. So, you know, we want to just make sure that these women that are getting placed aren't going to be facing any sort of labor trafficking issues, or any sort of sexual harassment. And that's where the Indiana Commission would come into play, just because unfortunately a few of our women have had to deal with some of that. So yeah, I mean, there's a lot of layers, dependent, like, you know, for them getting a job, but we're trying to partner with other people and kind of get a better understanding. But I know financially, like paying a tuition or not being able to qualify for student aid has been a main reason why they don't go to the community college. And then on top of that, the fact that they get to learn next to another woman that looks like them, or just other women in general, that's been always a huge appeal for them.
Can I follow up just very quickly on something you said? You talked about fellowships or scholarships. To what extent is income a constraint for access to training? We don't hear very much about it. We hear a lot about interest and exposure, but could you tell us a little bit about income status?
As far as entering our program, or just
As far as entering training more broadly? Yeah.
So, I mean, the women that are coming to our programs are making less than $60,000 a year. And so depending on if they're taking one course or multiple courses, you know, that I don't know how much they're going to end up paying in tuition for that. But, you know, I think it's the appeal of being around other women. Like, so for the women who are making over 60,000 a year, you know, they've considered going to a community college or even an art center. But the fact that you're around other women who understand maybe some of the challenges you've gone through. And I think it's the just the uncertainty of what you're going to do with the skill. Like, so for the women who've been like, oh, I've always wanted to learn, but I just never did it. And it's why didn't you try? It's either because they weren't sure what they wanted to do with the skill. And it kind of feels like if you're taking on the commitment of a degree, then you would need to figure out what you want to do, and then not feel like you're kind of quote unquote wasting money if you get into a program and then you find out you don't like it, then what? So.
And Sue, do you see income playing a role in the decisions of people coming in to train?
Yeah, I do. I see income playing a role. I also see other resources that play a role. You know, it's a matter of all of us, you know, having priorities. So if you can go to class, or if you need to help your child get to class, it's usually the child that takes precedent over you getting to class. So I think it's not only paying for the class, but it's also those priorities and those resources that are needed to support, you know, attending a class or learning a new skill. And I think that you know, one good thing that came from COVID is, as community colleges, we were able to put a lot more things online and do a lot more hybrid and do a lot more with, you know, learning anytime, learn anywhere. Those kinds of options really apply to a lot of our female students. And so I think, you know, I think that's an opportunity as well. But yeah, I think that another thing is time. And that's why I think apprenticeship is so critical, because in an apprenticeship, they usually are, part of their job is to learn, right? So they usually have that learning on company time.
Great, thank you. One thing I wanted to raise, and it's coming through in some of the questions, is there's an underlying theme here of employers being able to engage earlier in the pipeline, as well as with what you might consider intermediary organizations that can help fill the gap. And so if you could tell employers, one or two things you could do right now to engage in that way, what would that guidance be? It's for everybody.
To engage, Sammy, are you asking with younger generation potential talent and or more early career individuals at their organization? Which one or both?
Both, or yeah, I mean, if you could give guidance to employers on working and thinking about pipeline development as opposed to let me fill this particular job that I need. How, because we hear employers want to do that and sometimes they don't know how. And so what can they do?
Yeah, I think, there's lots of opportunities, and I'm sure Sue and Consuelo have some, advice to share as well. What we see companies who are most successful at recruitment in terms of kind of outreach and connections, that the first step is often looking at who are those educational partners, institutions locally, to start building relationships if they don't already have relationships with those individuals. Those are the people who are often talking to people who are looking for career guidance, who are looking for kind of a direction as to where to go professionally. And so having a built-in relationship with those educators and educational institutions is really important. Connections with community development and economic development is equally important, so that they have those right kind of tentacles where individuals might be referring individuals for resources for employment and for education. Also, Manufacturing Day is huge. So today is a national day of awareness to, ideally in a normal year, open up facilities, host community tours, host individuals through your places of work to showcase what modern day manufacturing looks like. It has been hugely influential in our series, and I did a link in the chat. In the interviews that I've conducted over our past 10 and a half years, so many women have stated that they never thought they'd be in a manufacturing career. And it was often by kind of chance rather than by design. But a few of them first found there, and actually I'd say a growing number have cited that they found out about manufacturing through a plant tour. So, having a school tour through a facility or a local facility on a community day, those things really make all the difference. And so I think opening up facilities as much as possible in a safe way is great, and not just doing it on Manufacturing Day, but also doing it year round. We also see more and more manufacturers who are doing virtual tours. So we have to meet people where they're at. And if you look at the job seeking population, or kind of largest population that could fill many of those positions, they're on platforms that are social media oriented. So they're on places like YouTube and they're on places like TikTok. And so I would encourage, if you don't already have a YouTube channel for your company, it's critical. You need to have videos there, and not just showing kind of, hey, here's what we make and what we do, but telling stories about, your community service that your company may be committed to, your charitable work that you're doing, initiatives around sustainability. All of those things are hugely important, and also can impact whether a person wants to make a decision to work at your career or your employment location. So all of that is really important. And I think too, when we look at frontline individuals and people in production, manufacturers have come to us challenged with, how do I develop my frontline and production workers? And so we just launched a new program for empowering women in production. And it's specifically designed in a 20-week cycle that's done in a remote way. It includes coaching and assessments, and coaching that's both executive coaching as well as peer coaching and accountability partners. But again, trying to help these women find that kind of sight line of, here's where I could grow in this company, and here's where this first line of leadership could be, so that they can envision what a pathway to kind of growth in that organization might look like.
I would just add to that what Allison is saying. I think that's what she said is critical. We have to have that employer engagement. As community colleges, if we don't have that employer engagement, it's very difficult to tell a student and show a student a career pathway in a manufacturing company, for example, or really with any company. It's most of us know what nurses do, we know what teachers do, but we don't know what manufacturing companies do. So we need that clear structural pathway to make sure that folks do understand what they'll be doing and how they'll be compensated. But I also think that we've got to look at internally as a company, as any manufacturing company, and look and listen to what your own female employees are saying. If your female employees are saying, we dread going to work, we don't, whatever it is, if you can keep your finger on that pulse and try to, understand what they're saying, word of mouth goes a long way. And so there are lots of, lots of folks that are turned away from manufacturing. I mean, as I said earlier, 3/4, if you read some statistics, 3/4 of the women in the United States don't think manufacturing is a good career. Why is that? So let's, look internally and make sure that a good message is being sent by our female employees out into the public domain. And I also think that, anytime you can connect with even, younger and younger populations, donating, I don't know, ink pens or pencils to your schools and things that have the company logo on it. I think it's really critical also to be able to demonstrate to potential and future employees what their sense of self-worth will be at this company. So in other words, do I make fuel tubes, and if without those fuel tubes we can't have cars, and do I make medical equipment, and what does that medical equipment do? So I think it's important for the workforce today to really feel that they are making a difference, and in manufacturing you make a difference maybe more than in any other industry.
Consuelo?
So for us, a lot of women are getting connected to our organization based on word of mouth. So we haven't really had to do a lot of marketing for our programs. Women have heard about it. Like even this fall semester, we have a mom and daughter doing it together. And it's not the first time we've seen moms and daughters taking the welding class and then telling each other about it. So we also had field trips, so that also gave women the opportunity to see what a fabrication shop would look like compared to a manufacturing facility. So taking folks to the physical locations is always really great and helpful, but we also do talk about different career paths within welding as they're going through our courses with us. And then we also have a lot of events that we either attend or we try to host. And that also gives us another way to invite either employers, staffing agencies, other organizations to come and see what it is that we're doing, and even be able to talk to some of the women who've already completed the program and even understand, like, what is it that they're looking for in a career. And so that also definitely helps us communicate more with other minority women who might not be comfortable or be willing to go into, a community college or a welding facility. So, I mean, it is very heavily dependent on word of mouth, I think. So a bad experience that someone has had in a welding shop, that will easily get spread around. Indianapolis is pretty small, so unfortunately, those experiences have definitely gotten around. And so if one of our welders is having a great experience at a company, then she will tell everybody else and other women will follow. So that's been our experience. And, so it's really important to not just me, but the organization, that we work on establishing that relationship with an employer and understanding, what it is that they are looking for in an employee, like what kind of values. Do they have female supervisors, other women welding, or have they ever had a woman on staff? If they haven't, maybe even asking them the questions like, well, how would you handle a situation of sexual harassment? Do they already have sexual harassment or other kind of harassment policies in place? If not, would they potentially be open to that? So that's really, like, we want to help give employers the tools to kind of be able to handle maybe confrontation or other issues that arise on the floor that maybe they've never thought would happen. And the more women that go into these jobs, then obviously, like, making sure that there's simple things like a woman's restroom. Like, I know that I've heard from other women who've gotten placed, like, how surprising it was that it was a big deal to have their own restroom, or have men stop using the female restaurant or the women's restroom because there weren't any women on staff. So, and then, as people keep talking, more women who are already in a manufacturing environment, we talk to them like, well, is there welding at your company? If so, is that something you want to like potentially move into the welding department? If so, do you know what kind of welding, understanding what company they're working for and what they need, either as far as certification or skills, and how can we help them develop those skills specific to that position?
So I'd like to follow up on a question that came in a little while ago, which was actually related to how Latinas Welding Guild is funded, but more broadly, and Consuelo, we'd of course like to hear about that, but more broadly, when employers are working with these types of organizations, which are nonprofits and don't necessarily have a revenue stream in the traditional way that we would think about it, are there funding models or sort of collaboration models that can really help make it a win-win for both the organization, the participants, as well as the employer?
Yeah, so we're coming up on 4 years next month. So, I mean, we're still pretty young, and obviously COVID has taken some time out of just the process a little bit. But for the most part, we have grants that we'll apply for. And we'll also do custom fabrication, which that helps generate revenue. So that when we get custom fabrication work in, we'll work with each client depending on how they want to be involved. So if they want to be a part of the design process, like we've had a design workshop where we've had kids from a neighborhood come in and actually help figure out, what do you want to see in your park and why? Why is the neighborhood so special to you? And what do you want to like have represented through this piece? We've had welding workshops where, some have come in like, oh, okay, we're going to put this in the park. So now we're going to learn how to do some welding. We also have public workshops. Those are ticketed and project-based. So that also helps us generate some revenue to help support some of those income-based scholarships or other program needs. Outside of that, our women's courses, we're really trying to connect with employers or other groups that would be willing to sponsor, whether that's sponsor like maybe a student, sponsor PPE, sponsor consumables, because obviously every bit helps. And with COVID, the increase on supplies, it's been even more crucial at this point. And that's where we've gotten a lot of inquiries about potential employees, but it's about establishing a relationship with an employer, because just because everyone's looking for employees doesn't mean like we're going to be able to fill everybody's needs, but we also just want to make sure they're going to a safe space. And so our goal and our hope would be that an employer would be willing to invest in us just like we would want to invest back into them. So it requires more than just a phone call or, one time face-to-face. We really want to have a long-term relationship going with anyone who's basically in the industry. And we've gotten a lot of good support from not just, folks in the welding industry, but also other vendors that maybe have supplies that go into the welding industry and stuff like that. So, but yeah.
And I was just going to say, Sammy, to your question. So we have an education foundation, and we're always looking for new strategic donors and partners in our mission to make education and training affordable and accessible to all women in industry. So we've had some great foundations that have worked with us in the past and or are currently working with us on, for example, our virtual learning series. We are looking for a new foundation and partner for that next year. We deliver live learning each month. It's complimentary to all of our members and very affordable to those that are not affiliated with membership. And then we also support a year-round virtual learning library that we're looking for partners and sponsors and donors in that area as well. And we had foundations that supported and corporations that supported our Empowering Women in Production program. Again, trying to make it a low-cost training opportunity and affordable, and as well specifically targeting some states and some areas where manufacturing is most concentrated. So we're always happy to have discussions with potential donors and organizations that are like-minded and similarly passionate around developing and advancing and attracting women in industry.
These programs also have a regional presence, right? And so we know that a lot of states have really exceptional community college programs where people can get training. There's also like Latinas Welding Guild is regional here, but Allison, Women in Manufacturing has, I think, chapters in most states, if not every state. So what is the extent to which some of these are really shaped by the regional economy and regional employers? Could you talk a little bit about what that distinction is between the broader economy and what employers might be able to do within their own towns or counties? And Sue, if you wanted to take that one, from where you sit, I know you see a lot of that.
Sure. So, I mean, we participate in a lot of statewide initiatives and a lot of nationwide initiatives as a community college. And so I think there are grant opportunities out there. I think that finding that commonality across the country, and I work solely with manufacturing companies, and you know, the need for Industry 4.0 skills has come up, and so how we partner with other colleges, community colleges across the country is a way to bring those skill sets into our curriculum. And we do that with various organizations like American Technical Education Association and others that are national. In the state, we have you know, state organizations that we work with, like Indiana Manufacturers Association and different state organizations that we work with to sort of address those issues and challenges as a state. And then each campus in our system has its own campus service area, and they have groups that they get together that work through things specifically for their service area. So for example, if you have one company that leaves in a campus service area, then you know, we have the connections to get those folks connected to other employers. So I think that that's the, you know, it just really is a combination of, you know, working with the community that you're in and understanding the national needs.
And Allison, Consuelo, do either of you have any last comments on that question?
Yeah, I think, you know, we found we have 30 local chapters throughout the United States, and we hope to someday have a chapter in every state. And then we as well are starting our first international activity in 2022 in Germany, which is where we have our largest international membership base. But, you know, we find that education and training is so very localized. And so we really have helped to support our local chapters in developing deep relationships with their educators and institutions and employers. And again, we hope to evolve our resources that we can deploy both nationally and also locally as they kind of meet the needs and demands of our professional members as well as our corporate members.
So locally, I mean, we work with a variety of different groups like community focused organizations, local high schools, summer programs, HOAs. We've worked a little bit with community colleges, but not really. And so, I mean, we've been helping a lot of women here in the Indianapolis area, but we've been getting more and more reach from you know, different schools around outside of Indianapolis. And then we've even had connections made with other women, Latina welders outside of the state across the country. And so, you know, there has been a lot of push where, you know, we may look at having traveling workshops or traveling courses or trying to set up other hubs across the country, just because, you know, it's definitely a cultural, I think, a cultural interest, but also a cultural need, just because typically Latinas don't really get an opportunity to work next to each other, and even other marginalized groups. And so, you know, I think that as far as our future goes, like we definitely want to broaden it outside of the US too. So I think that moving into countries South and Central America would be also kind of an ideal option for us, but this is just the beginning.
Well, we are at time, and so I want to first thank our panelists. It's been really, really exciting to have you here. It's Manufacturing Day. There's no better time to talk about the future of manufacturing and the important role of women in it. For our participants, we will be making some notes and a brief that comes out of this session available publicly. We'll get that all to the folks that attended today, but we'll also make that available. Our goal with these forums is to provide actionable guidance. So we're going to be taking some case studies and some samples of what employers and what policymakers can do to support women in manufacturing. And you should be getting those within a few weeks. And so thank you, everybody, for joining us. And thank you so much, Allison, Consuelo, and Sue, for your time and for your insight.